You are here with By the Cover. Today we're going to be reviewing Wilderness Reform by Matt and Harrison Query. This book was 340 pages and took me 6 days to read. The genre for this one is listed as horror or supernatural thriller. I'll talk about why I don't agree with that later in the review. I would rate this book a 5.5 out of 10. This review will contain spoilers, so if you do not want to hear those, click off now. The summary: 13-year-old Ben is sent to an isolated reform program for troubled teens by a juvenile court judge. But when he arrives at the camp located on the edge of the vast wilderness of northwestern Montana, he immediately recognizes that there is something weird about the counselors. They're too friendly and upbeat, yet Ben can tell there's an undercurrent of menace. As he gets to know the boys in his cabin, he soon discovers that they each have far more going on for them than whatever crime landed them there. Each has a different critical skill, one that could help them unearth what is really going on in this place and how to make it out alive. They are inching ever closer to the truth, but the hidden evil beneath the camp's surface will make itself known in order to deter them. As far as my likes of this book, I picked this book up based off the cover. I think the cover looks absolutely awesome. I think the writing is very, very well done, and it's beautiful. The descriptions of wilderness and atmosphere and everything to do with the camp and the retreat in general is all very well done. I found myself very much immersed in this world, and it was a good time. I liked that Ben, the primary character, has a Cajun background and accent. Being a big fan of Gambit from X-Men, that was an easy sell. The 4 primary characters, Ben, Trent, Rodrigo, and Billy, were enjoyable, and I loved the dialogue and the banter between them. This was ultimately a great story about a tight-knit group of kids developing a relationship in a wildlife reform program. As far as my dislikes, first of all, I read the paperback edition of this book, and the font that they used was very small, so I struggled just reading the book. It wasn't a comfortable read. This book has lots of description. That is both a blessing and a curse. It's very well done, but there's way too much of it. The book is extremely wordy, and it doesn't go anywhere quickly. The book is also repetitive, often going over the same plot points repeatedly, just to remind you in case you missed them the first 10 times that they were brought up. The pacing is extremely slow. The prologue had me hooked, and it was riveting. It was probably the best part of the book. Unfortunately, that pace didn't continue. The next 300 pages just felt like a camping trip with some slight elements of mystery sprinkled in here and there. The first 50 pages annoyed me with how descriptive things got and how slow things were going. Then I just accepted not a lot was going to happen, and I enjoyed the majority of the book for what it was. I was able to immerse myself in the world, and it just felt like being on an outdoor adventure. Even if it never went anywhere, it was still a pleasant experience. The last 38 pages picked up the pace again, but the ending just seemed like a disjointed mess of ideas colliding together. It certainly was original, but it wasn't all that satisfying. While I didn't feel that character development was a problem, I thought the characters were developed fine. They didn't have that much depth to them. The entire book, you're conflicted because these kids came from terrible backgrounds. Being in this program is a benefit to them. The counselors, while overly enthusiastic and cartoon cutouts of what they should be, do teach the kids and just don't seem to be that bad. It's hard to hate antagonists that are looking out for disadvantaged kids. The inner dialogue of Ben is not how a 13-year-old would think. It is way too grown up and way too introspective for a 13-year-old. The book gives backgrounds on why the kids are at the camp, and I think the severity of 2 of the crimes committed would not land them in a wilderness reform program. Specifically, one of them commits murder, and another one commits arson. The primary issue I have with this book were the antagonists. They make Ben, the primary character, out to be a child prodigy who is great at manipulating adults, and because of this, he is always one step ahead of them, manipulating them and playing them throughout the entire book. For all but half a page, there was never a moment in the entire book that I ever felt the antagonists had the upper hand in any situation. They weren't a challenge for Ben. They certainly weren't a challenge for Ben plus a group of his friends. The next part that I'm going to talk about is the biggest spoiler in this review, so if you don't want to hear that, definitely click off now. The biggest antagonist in this book had exactly half a page where it seemed he might be a slight threat. Then he's immediately taken out by one of his former henchmen. The primary characters didn't even need to lift a finger. So none of the antagonists were challenging. The primary antagonist also had a stint towards the end of the book where he kept calling all his followers his sweet boys, which was creepy and uncomfortable. Overall, if this had just been a coming-of-age story in a wildlife reform program, it would have been a good book. The writing itself was high quality, great descriptions, and the authors built an immersive world that was easy to get lost in. There were also elements of a compelling mystery in this book. But ultimately, as a horror novel, I think this falls completely flat. Without compelling antagonists, there is no terror, there's no fear, there's no tension that can be built. And so I didn't find this book scary. I just found it to be a story about a wildlife adventure with some really weird shit happening at the end of the book. So that's about it. We'll catch you later.